How's it going, people? Slabber here, and this is episode 5.1 of Runescape Lore, and the first of the Runescape event week for the lore. Game on! So, starting off, we're going to be covering the Zarosian Extermination. So, what is this Zarosian Extermination? Well, it was a dramatic event of constant war, destroying entire civilizations, cities, and knowledge from the Second Age. It was primarily caused by Zamorok and his followers, and later aided by Saradominists, both of whom wanted a portion of Zaros' vast empire for themselves. However, despite the power of their enemies, some cities, such as Sentistan, managed to hold out for hundreds of years, but they were eventually overwhelmed and conquered by the sheer numbers of Zamorok and Saradomin. So, let's get into it then. Zamorok, through a number of unknown events, somehow was able to find the Stone of Jazz, and absorbed some of its power. At this point, he then became a god himself, and years later, with his godly powers fully developed, he found himself unstoppable, even by the Dragonkin, protectors of the Stone of Jazz. Upon his return, Zamorok sought out many of his former followers, and soon built an army to take over the world from the other gods. Many of Zaros' holdings, even large and prosperous cities, were soon taken over or wiped out by Zamorok. Saradomin at this point, Zaros' greatest enemy, helped Zamorok as well. Though they turned on one another once their common enemy was defeated, many of Zaros' remaining followers were wiped out, and many more turned to Zamorok, not wanting to be killed. Sentistan, the most prosperous city of Zaros back then, survived for many centuries, trying to isolate itself from the devastated world. Within, though, devoted followers of Zaros, such as Azanadra, worked to restore Zaros' influence on the world, even in their god's absence. Later on in the war, though, Azanadra was trapped by the combined forces of Zamorok and Saradominist forces inside a pyramid, and his life force separated into 4 diamonds, which were then given for safekeeping to 4 powerful Zamorokian warriors. In the meanwhile, though, Nex, another powerful Zarosian general, had gathered a massive army and was working to secure the Majara ritual plateau for the upcoming Ritual of Rejuvenation. Despite Nex's mighty strength, she was eventually forced by Saradominist followers into an icy cavern and trapped within. The Saradominists then built a temple around it, calling it the Temple of Lost Ancients. Many years have passed at this point. Zamorok had gathered an army so powerful that it seemed nothing could potentially stop him from achieving his victory of the God Wars. In response to this, Saradomin forged a triumvirate of gods between himself, Bandos and Armadil, in order to discuss their battle plans. The gods reached a conclusion and forged the God Sword, a weapon powerful enough to even slay a god. An army was gathered, and the Armadillian Aviantes were given the task of delivering this God Sword so that Zamorok may be destroyed once and for all. However, misfortune soon befell the army, and it was quickly eviscerated by the vast Zamorakian forces. An ambush was also launched onto the Aviantes delivering the God Sword, attempting to seize the sword in the process. The Aviantes fought off the Zamorakians long enough to retreat into the ancient temple in the mountains. There, they continued to fight for the God Sword. At this point, both Saradomin and Bandos sent their forces to lend the Aviantes a hand, marking the arrival of armies of Saradominist knights, while representing Bandos were the Regishan goblins, orcs, and ogres, amongst others. Tensions quickly rose at this point amongst the gods, and they soon turned against each other, and what should have been a war against Zamorok soon became a 4-way quarrel for the fearsome God Sword. At some point during the battle, a group of Saradominist priests and priestesses were approached by a stranger. This stranger told them about Guthix, and how Guthix was the only hope to save the world. the priests were then persuaded to turn against Saradomin and become Gothixian followers. However, when the priests and priestesses performed this ritual that they were told would wake Gothics, Nex, the fearsome Zarosian general, was instead awakened and freed from her prison. The stranger, who was revealed later on to be the Marjara Sliske, killed all the priests and priestesses after they'd done this. One of them, by the name of Ashalot Rice, was proficient in Gothixian rituals and was able to transform herself into a nature spirit so as to pass her story on to the adventurers. For the first time in history, all 4 gods joined together to re-imprison the almighty Nex once again. And they actually succeeded, and Nex was once again trapped behind the frozen door. After this though, the 4 armies started to fight again for the Godsword, turning into an all-out 4-way war. Gothixian forces joined the fray as well, surprisingly enough. However, not for power, but simply seeking an end to the fighting and preserves the world. In the God Wars dungeon, some of them cast an enormous freezing spell, preserving the inhabitants of the dungeon until this very day. Eventually though, the damage to the world grew so great that the world cried out with pain and Guthix himself awoke. Upon which, he cast the gods out from Gielinor and established a wall, known as the Edicts of Guthix, to prevent the gods from interacting with the world in all but the slightest ways. Guthix at this point then returned back to slumber. However, during the period of time known as the Third Age, the entirety, or very close to the entirety, of Zaros' forces from the Second Age were wiped out, and all that was left was the few of Azanadra, Nex, and Wahisiatal. Very few remain still loyal to Zaros, but they could very well simply just be working in the shadows, keeping a close eye on the Zamorak and Saradominus forces, simply waiting for Zaros' return. So that was the Zarosian Extermination of the Third Age. I hope you all enjoyed that, and I will catch you all later. Have a good one.